Welcome back, everyone. So, what do we have today? This is a machine that I bought to kind of save my sanity a little bit. So, we have a very, very high amount of leaves in this yard, and more so than I was expecting. We've got at least 2 good-sized oak trees, which produce, amongst other things, acorns and leaves. We've got a couple of other, we got a couple of nevergreens in the back as well. Just the neighbors all have trees, and all the leaves tend to land on my yard. So, when I bought the house, I noticed the yard was relatively clean, and I wasn't really thinking much of it, but the realtors did say that he actually cleaned the yard because it was an estate sale, and the realtor wanted the place to look good, so he brought his family to this house, and he raked the yard. And this is in a neighborhood where people generally keep their yards up pretty much most of the year. Things look really nice, so he wanted it to look as good as it could. So we moved in, and the leaves hadn't completely fallen. By little after Thanksgiving, though, they were all on the ground. And so within just a couple of weeks, though, the yard was once again covered in leaves. And then I realized, well, I'm in trouble. So spring rolls around, and I think we filled about 30 bags of yard waste. 30 bags. That's mostly leaves, and this is a 0.2 acre property, piece of land. 0.2 acres, not even a full quarter of an acre. And yeah, so that happened. And then spring rolls around, so we cleaned the yard up. It looked great all summer. Well, I've already cleaned the yard probably 3 times. I filled about 40 or 50 bags of yard waste. And let's take a look at it now. Yeah. Oh man. Welcome to my nightmare. It's actually not bad. Not bad at all. Could be worse. So, where does this machine come into play? Okay, so let's talk. So I've used this machine once already. I've cleaned the entire yard of all leaves, and it looked pretty good. But I have some concerns. So this is the Troy-Bilt CSV 060. This is the non-self-propelled model. It does have this very useless hose, and we'll talk about that in a minute, for cleaning up things out of flower beds and hard-to-reach areas. It's a very poorly built machine overall, and for the price, I mean, it wasn't terribly expensive. When you think about, well, here's what I'm getting at. So there really isn't much competition for this machine at all, because MTD, who manufactures both Troy-Bilt yard machines, Cub Cadet, Craftsman, amongst others, and even some Toro products, MTD has the market cornered, basically, for consumer-grade leaf sucker-uppers, yard vacuums. They have the market cornered, so there is no real competition in that price bracket. Price bracket being, between maybe $400 and $800 or $1,000. I think the next machine up from this is made by, I can't think of the name of the company, but usually find them in stores that are usually privately owned or independent dealers rather than big box stores. And it cost over, I think the price turned out at around $1,200. It was more than double the cost of a Troy-Bilt machine. And that machine looks to be pretty well put together, but this one, again, there's not really a lot of competition, so Troy-Bilt or MTD doesn't really have to try, and they're not. So right out of the box, this thing was already broken. I guess that kind of tainted my thoughts on this machine, because straight out of the box, I had to make 2 repairs. One of them being one of the rear wheels had fallen off in shipping, because the axle is just a straight steel rod with those little caps that you knock on with a hammer, and one of them had fallen off in shipping. So I had to reattach it. Fortunately, it was still floating around inside the box, and it didn't get lodged somewhere else where it wouldn't be found or could cause damage. So that kind of pissed me off. Probably should have brought it back, but I just wasn't in the mood, and I was running out of daylight, a problem around this time of year. So that had happened, and then once I got that put together, I put the oil in the motor, fired it up. The motor's actually, believe it or not, the motor is Chinese made. It's I don't know who makes this engine for MTD, but you know, it started right up, and it runs very well. But anyway, the little vacuum hose thing, this wasn't properly fastened. It was improperly installed, so as soon as I went to go use it, it just fell apart. So I reattached the clamp. So the way it's built, this is supposed to clamp down on here to give it some extra strength, but it wasn't on right. So I reclamped it, and then this side fell off. I'm finding that a lot of the plastic bits are made of a very inferior plastic that will likely break, either if it's used in too cold of a temperature or just plain over time. Now, plastic, as you all know, it gets brittle with time. So, stuff like this will likely break. This piece here, that's just going to break off. I know it's going to break. So how this thing really works, though, is you have a couple of different options. You can use it like a lawnmower, where it will suck up through this front snout here, and that's accomplished by leaving the hose partway out of the socket. It has 2 positions, out and in, and you just take this. This is a flat door flap handle, and you put it to the rear position, and that opens up this channel here for full suction. If you want to use the hose, just lift and dump it forward, and then pop the hose in all the way, where it opens up another door. And pretty simple operation. One of the reasons I bought this was so that I could shred sticks. And, I'm thinking, well, 2-inch diameter is its maximum size. It should be fine, right? Well, the problem is, it only shreds 2-inch sticks if they're basically, well, like broom handles. Like, you could shred a broom handle, but that's why I have a Blendtec blender. I didn't buy this to shred broom handles. That's what the blender's for. So, there's that unfortunately, so, when nature produces things like trees and shit, they don't grow straight like rods and broom handles. There's knots, and there's twists and turns. So this thing is useless for shredding sticks and twigs. It just doesn't do the job, because you can't fit the stuff down there, even though it meets the diameter requirement. So that is a fail on their part. So, that is a problem. It doesn't clog, though. Now, when I was a kid, my parents used to borrow one from a family friend whenever we had, heavy leaf seasons, that thing. So we would borrow one, but this was back in the late 90s, and this was a 94-ish Troy-Bilt Troy-Bilt Chipper Shredder Vac. So the one that we borrowed was like the first generation, and the difference was it was a much physically larger machine, but the engine, it was a horizontal shaft motor with the impeller on the side. And what it would do is, if you wanted to use it like a lawnmower, you would disconnect a hose from the snout and connect it to this, or something like that. The problem with that is, because it required everything to pass through a hose about that size, it would frequently clog, especially if it was if you waited a little too long to do your yard cleanup. It would just clog right up, and it was useless. So we ended up raking anyway. which I'm not against. Raking a yard is fine. It's just very time consuming. This thing cuts raking in half. It just gets the job done when it works. So yeah, it doesn't clog up too much, not like its predecessor. So that was a blessing. I even ran it through some heavy stuff, and it did clog, but that was because a stick got lodged in there, and it prevented. It just caused a backup of leaves and detritus. So the concept is there, just the build quality sucks. Like, for example, so I was talking about why the hose is so damn useless. The hose is completely 100% useless because the plastic that they use to build the hose is far too stiff. So when you're trying to maneuver the hose around, it just doesn't want to do it. What's happening is it's putting all the pressure and tension on this little plastic flange here. I'll try to demonstrate for you guys. It's now 30 degrees, about average leaf pickup weather for New England, and we're going to see how she does. She's got a full tank of gas, doesn't burn a drop of oil. This good motor. It's a Chinese MTD brand engine, and you know it is what it is. But let's go ahead and start it up, and we'll do some leaf pickup. Choke. This thing is. Doesn't let you maneuver it. Still some room in that bag. Oh. So basically, it does a fairly decent job in you know, standard vacuum mode, and the problem really starts to arise when you try to use the hose, because again, I used it in 45, almost 50 degree weather, and it wasn't much better. The hose is just not flexible enough. So it's almost impossible to maneuver it around, especially when it's cold. And let's be honest, it's probably going to crack anyway. I wish they had used something a little bit more pliable, but you know, what are you gonna do, right? Buy the alternative, which is what? So it's the same machine, whether it says Troy-Bilt, MTD, Craftsman, or whatever brand name they're using for the week. I don't think they still make the Craftsman brand one, though. I haven't seen it. I've been looking, haven't seen it. Because I think it's priced a little bit better than the Troy-Bilt. Really, though, the Troy-Bilt name is synonymous with chipper vacs. They used to advertise these things heavily back in the day, and I mean, it did improve over the original design by quite a bit. The quality just isn't there. The materials are very poor. Initial assembly quality isn't great. One of the things I was surprised, though, is out of the box, it was very quick to get it up and running, because the only thing you have to do is assemble and install the handle, and everything else is basically done. It really, I don't want to knock it too much, because it is saving my back. I don't have to rake. Probably should, but I don't. One other thing it struggles with is acorns. This does not suck up acorns. It'll pick up a couple of them, but it will not clean up after your oak tree. It just doesn't have the suction for it. For the acorns, I use a leaf blower. I blow them into a pile, and then I shovel them up. That's what I do with acorns. This is not your friend for acorns. They'll get sucked up through the hose, though. The problem is the hose is what it was. You know, it's a shitty hose. Don't use the hose. I can do this entire yard on about half a tank of gas. About 2 tanks of fuel will do the whole basically the whole yard. Yes, so this is the $550 version. This is not self-propelled. There is a self-propelled version of this. It costs about $100 more. I would have bought the self-propelled one just because, you know, why not? But they didn't stock it in my area. So the self-propelled one, same machine. One difference is the self-propelled one has an extension on the hose, so it's doubly useless. Double your extension is double your usefulness. No, it doesn't work that way. But it does have self-propulsion. I'm not sure I would ever. Honestly, though, I think this is probably a better buy, because there's less stuff to break. On the self-propelled one, if the belt breaks, you have to buy a special tool to pull the impeller off. Yeah, so the impeller, by the way, is a solid cast alloy something or other disc that is mounted up underneath the motor. So it does a pretty decent job. You can use a lawnmower to clean up leaves, and I've done it. It just takes a lot longer. It's a lot less efficient, and it just wears out your mower unnecessarily. I mean, yeah, unless you really hate the mower. But mowers weren't made for cleaning up leaves. They were made for cutting and cleaning up grass. The difference is, I mean, it just doesn't have as much vacuum, and the bags are smaller. So, keep that in mind. All right, well, I got work to do. Have a good one. Well, pretty much got the entire yard, but some of the leaves blew back. The tree still has some leaves on it, so they're still going to come crashing down. But I got the whole side yard on this side and half the backyard done. You can see that's about the density that it was. But now that's all cleaned up. I ran it behind the trees, got all that. don't know. So I'm actually into this project, or into this cleanup effort, approximately 3 hours. And about maybe an hour's worth of that time has been spent cleaning up acorns with a rake, a leaf blower, and a shovel. And as expected, the hose broke again. I'm not going to waste any more time with this. This thing is useless. Absolutely useless. But look at this. It's completely, totally inflexible. It's wowed me a little bit. I haven't had. I mean, the handle is very basic. There's no niceties to this thing. There's no rubber coating on the handle or nothing like that. I mean, it's just painted steel. I don't even think it's powder coated. I think it's just painted. Looks like just thin paint. You know, so this isn't a machine you want to leave outside. You want to garage it or put it in your basement when it's not in use, because it will rust, it will degrade. The one unit they had on display at Home Depot actually was already starting to rust, so if that's any indication. On a side note, I was repainting the front end of this freezer that my parents gave us. It had some scratches and stuff. So I painted the front of it, and I set the paint can down over here that I had, and one thing led to another, and the can exploded. I got paint everywhere. All over the floor, which I cleaned up. I got it on these windows. I got it on some screens. I'm not a happy camper. But anyway, it'll all be good in the end. I'm going to clean the glass and... Anyway. So I performed the initial oil change on the Troy-Bilt chipper vac. I've run it, I don't know how many hours. I probably have about a good 10 hours on it now. And you can see that the initial oil change on any engine is going to look like this. There's a lot of metal in there, a lot of assembly lube. Assembly lube contains a lot of, I believe, zinc. And you can see that there's a lot of that. See, it's actually kind of beautiful. Very beautiful, but a lot of metal in that oil. So you want to make sure if you buy not just one of these machines, but if you want to buy a new lawnmower, snowblower, what have you, that first oil change is quite critical because there's a lot of metal in there. It's that shiny stuff that you see that makes it look pretty. That's assembly lube. It's, metal from the break-in process. I will say this, now that I'm getting used to running the machine and learning its idiosyncrasies, I'm actually starting to really like it. I'm not unhappy. It's doing the job, and it's doing it pretty well. Other than that stupid hose, which is an absolute design failure in my opinion, which it will require some re-engineering on my part. I'm really loving the machine, But anyway, I changed the oil, put some full synthetic 10W30 in there, which I had some leftover from something I was working on. And fortunately, the weather held out, and I got the whole yard cleaned. That's just for me blowing out the bag. But I got the whole yard cleaned, all the acorns and everything swept up. I washed the machine down a little bit. It's going to be really cold this week. We're talking 14 degrees or lower Fahrenheit, so that's mighty cold. But yeah, inaugural oil change is done. Now I gotta hose it off again. I'm gonna drain the fuel out of it. I don't think I'm gonna run it again this year. I'm gonna just let whatever remaining leaves fall and just deal with it. But maybe run it one more time. The whole yard's done. Oh, squirrel. The whole yard's done. What I've been doing, rather than using the stupid useless hose to clean out the areas between the trees, what I'm doing is I'm raking the leaves out with a hard rake, or a metal rake, into the middle, and I use the machine to suck them up. That works pretty well. There's this is today's haul. That's just for today. Now, as I stated earlier, the procedure for changing the oil in this machine is actually completely toolless. All you've got to do is take the oil cap off. I would do it without any fuel in the tank or with less than half a tank of fuel. Take the oil cap off, tilt the machine on its side, and let the oil pour out. That's the way it was designed. That's the way they want you to do it. Do it on a warm engine, let it run, do it after you use it for a little while, and just because you want the oil to be nice and warm, and you want any debris in the crankcase to be suspended in the oil. And then pour 20 ounces of oil, and then you'll bring it right to the full mark. Pretty simple. I mean, that's just the way it is these days. There is no drain plug underneath, as I mentioned earlier. It's actually right here. But remember, this engine is designed for many different applications. So they're not going to design the sump specifically for this machine. And that's why there is a drain plug that is totally useless. So that's just how they do it. But anyway, I'm going to leave the fuel in for now, because I'm going to probably run it one more time. And then I'll maybe give it one more hose off, and then I'll put it away for the winter. But I wanted to get the oil changed because that was pretty disgusting. A lot of people buy machines like this, and they do not change the oil the first couple seasons, if ever. And the problem with that is, again, you've got all that assembly lube and all that stuff that, you know, as an engine breaks in, you know, it can cause long-term damage if you don't get it out of there. Unfortunately, because of today's world, not everybody understands how small engines or engines in general work and what they require for care and feeding. And I don't blame anyone for that. I mean, it's just not common knowledge anymore. But some of this stuff was once common knowledge. Keep an eye on your oil levels, change it on a regular basis, you know, and then clean the carburetor once every couple of seasons. That used to be common knowledge, but it's not anymore. So you can usually pick these up for nothing. If you look on Craigslist or eBay or now Facebook Marketplace, you can find a machine like this in relatively good condition that may just need a carburetor cleaning. And fortunately, with the world of YouTube and all the videos on YouTube on how to clean a carburetor, it's not that big a deal. You can learn how to do it really simply and really fast. But on the flip side of that, you're going to find a lot of machines like this on places like eBay and Craigslist and whatnot that have an engine knock because the previous owner didn't change the oil or let it run out. So it's kind of a crapshoot, really. But anyway, that's my video, and I hope you like it. It cleaned my entire yard, and it did a fantastic job. So there you go. Okay, so we got the hose assembly on my bench here, and I looked over the owner's manual to see if there was any information on how this is supposed to be assembled, because I'm thinking that what you're supposed to do is actually drill a hole through the tube so that this bolt can go right through the hose. But when I got it, it was barely hanging on by a thread. So we need to improve this thing so that this doesn't keep falling apart. I shouldn't have to do this, but terrible design is what it is. I could do a warranty claim on this, and it would come back still prone to breaking. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this bolt completely, and I'm going to get it in position. So I'm going to put the hose on the machine, get everything in a relaxed state. Then I'm going to mark where the hole's going to go, then I'm going to drill it, and boom. Okay, I had to choke up on the hose so much, though. It's a little on the short side. So it doesn't rest on this little attachment like it's supposed to. But I can now move the hose. I mean, look at how stiff this hose is. Well, I guess it's not so bad. It's not so great either. I mean, it is. Ugh. Anyway, it's good though. I don't think it's going to break off again. There's plenty of tube beyond that clamp, so it's not going to just, you know, it should be fine. It should be fine. And that's how you fix your brand new Troy-Bilt chipper vac. Now, I did actually find an advertisement for the original one, the 1993 model that I actually used way back when I was a kid. Now, this is going to... I think there's a lot at play here. The lower cost of manufacturing today versus, you know, 25 years ago, but because manufacturing is now mostly automated and done by unskilled labor, 25 years ago, I think it was a little more complex. But the machine itself has, over time, simplified to what you see here. But the one made back in '93, the original Troy-Bilt chipper vac, was a very complex beast. And it was a very well-built machine. Granted, this one works better than the original one. The original machine in 1994 dollars cost over $1,000 in '94. So, adjusted for inflation, probably $2,000. This machine here cost $550 in 2019 dollars. So, you know, honestly, it's... yeah, it's hard to, you know, would I pay $2,000 for a machine that cleans my yard? Well, probably not. Would I pay $550 for a machine that does the same thing but lasts half as long? Well, maybe I would, and I did. Okay, I think we've got all the world's problems solved. So thank you for watching. This thing made it through its first season unscathed. Runs beautiful, doesn't knock or burn oil or anything crazy. We'll see how many years it lasts. And I will be upgrading some of this hardware just because I'm that kind of guy. Thanks again. Until then. You know, maybe we should pull the plug and see what that looks like. Nah, in another video.